Welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. If you enjoy our content, please like or subscribe.
Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you have construction needs? Maybe you need to get something done around the house. Check out K&H Construction. Chris Helms, local guy from Waxahachie. He'll take care of you. Let him know DV LeBron sent you. Today, my very special guest, who I'm glad to have back on the show, is the Ellis County District Attorney, Miss Lindy Beaty. How are you, ma'am?
Good. I'm doing great, DV. Thanks for having me back on. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while, ma'am. It's always good to see you. It's a big job that you got elected to, and I haven't been able to catch up to you and see how's that going. So I'm really glad to have you on and kind of catch up and find out what you've been doing in this last year in this office.
A lot. We've been doing a lot.
I could imagine. I can't even. So before I get into all the stuff, there's a lot of people that moved here, maybe don't know who you are. Can you go ahead and tell them about you?
Sure. So, I'm Lindy Beaty, the Ellis County District Attorney, started in January, but I've lived in the county since 2004, in Waxahachie specifically. Um, was a prosecutor from 2004 to 2019 here at the DA's office. Left in December of 2019, opened up my own law firm. I did criminal defense for about 5 years before coming back to the office as the elected official. So even before I came here, I had another 3.5 years experience of being a criminal prosecutor in another smaller rural county. But most of my experience has been here, kind of doing everything from juvenile prosecutor, misdemeanor chief prosecutor, felony prosecutor, felony chief prosecutor. So a little bit of everything in the office, but now I'm the head of all the other people doing the job.
Yeah. And it's a big job. What has surprised you in the last year, going in there and setting the tone, you're leading that office. What has surprised you? What have you liked? What's that experience been like?
So I think the best part for me is trying to formulate a staff here, and change the culture of the office. I feel that we are more engaged with the public. It's a more welcoming atmosphere. I think everybody really gets along here. And that's been, a challenge, honestly, over the last year, trying to get that formula right, if you will, of people and roles. Took office in January. I did move people around a lot to different positions than what they were before, which of course causes a lot of drama. Nobody likes change. Everybody's worried about it. It's a lot of anxiety. But now that we're in it, the people that I've moved around into those different positions are doing awesome. And now they love their position and, they're rock stars in what they're doing. And it was very important to me to put the right people in the right positions.
Mm.
Some people that were here and some people that I brought on are not here anymore. And that was part of making sure we're getting it right. But I don't, regret that. Some of those things have to happen. The county and the people elected me to do a job, to do it efficiently. And sometimes that means making the hard decisions. So while my favorite part has been trying to develop the staff into different teams and the way we're handling things to be more efficient, it's also kind of the worst part of my job because sometimes that does mean having to terminate people or do something different in the office. So it's the best and worst of the same coin.
Yeah, no, anytime you have to, let somebody go, that's not an easy thing. I mean, except for maybe Donald Trump when he did it on The Apprentice, but it's not an easy thing to do, to let people go. But what's been the most, because you've been there, you were prosecutor there. Now you're the boss. You're the one leading the office. What's been the most challenging thing in the last year?
Really trying to not micromanage, right? It's important that everybody understand what the vision is for the office and how I would like things to run, but I can't run everything myself, right? I cannot be everywhere all the time. It's impossible. We have, a staff of 61 people here. I cannot know what's going on every day in every aspect. So, it's been a little challenging to make sure I, set the tone, but then let them kind of do their thing and then just report to me. Cause I always want to have a hand in things. I think that's sort of my personality. Number one is let me do it, but I can't. Right. So that's probably been the biggest challenge of making sure, again, that the right people are in supervisory roles that are going to be accountable to me for things that happen in the office. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. We're doing really well right now. I'm super pleased, in the divisions and how things are going. So that's turned out well. It's just me trying to take a step back. It was somewhat easy, I guess, the first year because I just didn't have time
Hmm.
to where, trying to make sure we're doing reports. There's a lot of meetings. I'm in a lot of meetings all day, you know, so sometimes it's hard for me to do the work I'm trying to do when I'm in the meeting and then the next meeting about different things. And it's switching my brains into 100 different things in any given day.
Can you trying to figure out how you could clone yourself on this one, huh?
Yeah,
There could just be a
sometimes.
bunch of Lindys running around doing all these different things. I could only imagine it. Now, going forward, what would you like to see, in your next year going forward on this office?
So there's a couple of major things that I want to accomplish in this next year, right? So this first year was all about trying to clear the backlog as much as we can, move the dockets. So we were able to do that. I think we filed more cases in both misdemeanor and felony than last year. We disposed of more cases than we did last year. We're also going through really old cases that have just been sitting on the docket, right? That no one's wanted to do because it looks bad if you dismiss cases or do something, but they've just been sitting there. And I mean, like 20 years back. So we just,
Wow.
recently disposed of a 2004 theft case. We managed to get restitution for our victim, but it's cases like that. Like, why is this case lingering here? So that's, one of the things we were doing, and that's something that's going to continue in this next year. Because there's literally thousands of cases that were just kind of sitting there with nothing. I have a box in my office of about, I'm going to say 30 felony cases, serious felony cases, murders, ag sex assault, ag robberies, where nothing has happened for 30 years. Like it was filed, it was somebody got indicted, somebody had court settings, and then the file says set for trial like in 1993, and then nothing. There's no active warrant. There's nothing. So it's cases like that.
How does that even happen, Lindy? Like, is that even legal? What the heck?
I don't
So
know.
this person gets indicted and, it's just kind of just sitting out there. So this person is just running around the community.
Yes. Yes, we were looking at the cases going, these are serious crimes. None of these people are in custody, right? Because there's a couple of people that are deceased. So, okay, so we can move
Yeah.
those cases along. But the other ones, I think we're trying to track them down to see if we can find them. But it's also now trying to see where are the victims, on some of these ag assaults, these kid cases. They're adults now, and so we're going to be reaching out to the victims on those cases and bringing them into the office, because it's going to be a weird phone call that they're going to get from me that says, hey, remember your case from 30 years ago? Do you know what's been going on with it or not? Or, I'm surprised we haven't had victims coming in the office going, hey, what happened on my case? Because these are cases that were filed, meaning the process was going and then just stopped. So we're trying to backtrack, find as much as we can, uh, and looking for police reports. Do we still have evidence? Do we, where is all the stuff? Can we prove this? So that's going to be one of the things we're continuing to do next year. Also, this coming year, we've been working a lot with the Heights Family Violence Resource
Great
Center
place.
and our SART team, which is our sex assault response team that we have, made up of police department and the major police departments, the hospitals, the Heights, victim advocates, and we're really trying to open up the Heights to do our sex assault exams. Now, this is for adults. I'm not talking about children. That's a whole separate
Yeah,
thing. It's
that's
two completely separate things.
right.
But for adults, right now, if an adult sex assault occurs in our county, the victim has to go generally to JPS in Fort Worth to go get that exam
In
done and
JPS,
wait.
all the way.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And wait however many hours, behind everybody else in line to try to get that. We're hoping to open up the clinic at the Heights by April of this year so that we can change our protocols to where officers go there for the same exam right in, Midlothian, not having to go outside the county or anywhere else. There's not going to be waiting. We will have someone waiting there for them so it can get started. So it's going to be super beneficial for the county, for local law enforcement to have that done. So we're very excited about doing that. We've been working on getting sex assault advocates. We're required to have that before we can open up this same clinic. So I'm just going to put a plug here. If anybody is interested in becoming a sexual assault advocate and go through a 40-hour training and just be on call, we need people because we want to get coverage. It's got to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week coverage before we can open up this clinic. So
what does that entail? Because there might be some people who are interested, but
sure.
what kind of commitment, what is it? What do they do?
Yeah, so essentially they would get called out kind of when there's a sex assault like happening now. It's not for cases where, necessarily a victim comes in and says, "Hey, this happened to me 2 months ago." It's where a situation is police get called 911 call, "Help, I've just been sexually assaulted. I've just been raped right now," and they go out to the scene. The sex assault advocate would then meet the victim at the Heights and would be present with them during the SANE exam. So they have a person there. They also can be with them while law enforcement is interviewing them. They can't intervene. They can't talk for them. They can't do any of that. They're just merely a presence there. The law right now requires that law enforcement ask the victims if they want an advocate. But again, we don't have that program here in this county. When our victims go to JPS to get that SANE exam or the sex assault exam, they will get a sex assault advocate from JPS, but that person doesn't continue with them throughout the court process. And so this person is just kind of there for them, just being a support and a presence for them throughout any of the investigation and the court system as well.
Wow. I didn't even know, like, why can't they just go to Baylor? I mean, like,
Right.
they don't have that in these you got Baylor, Methodist, I mean, they can't go to any one of those?
They cannot because you have to have special training and certifications to do the sex assault exams. And our local hospitals don't have it. It's a lot. It's a lot of training to go through to try to get a program like that. That's why really the major hospitals have it. So it would be really a game changer for us to have something like that in a clinic setting as opposed to a hospital. We're getting a team of certified forensic nurse examiners to be able to do these exams for these victims here. So, they'll be on call as well. So it's not, an expense necessarily that's, a salaried kind of position. It's people sort of contract work being able to come in that have the right qualifications so that we can use them for testimony later if necessary, if the case goes on, to prosecution.
That is a big thing. I hope people and they would contact the Heights for information on that?
Yes, they can contact the Heights or they can even contact my office and we'll get them an application because it's going to be a continuing process. We're going through the first phase of training right now. So we have folks starting in February here in the next week or two to get their training. And then it's pretty much quarterly. So we'll have another training in May, and then every quarter after that. So anytime anybody's interested, we would like to have as many as possible so we don't have burnout of any one particular advocate being on call like every day or things like that.
Wow. Well, that's I'm glad that and the Heights is just awesome, and I'm
Yes.
glad that, you know, that we're moving forward on that because that's the worst time in anybody's life, at that point. That is like the most horrible, invasive thing that could happen to you. It destroys your soul. I mean, I feel I feel terrible for people who have gone through that, and to have somebody there with them is just, that's a beautiful thing, and that we're, trying to do that in our county, in our home, in our area, in our community. That is beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. No, it's going to be amazing, once all of that gets together. We just had a meeting actually earlier this morning with that team. Law enforcement is really engaged in wanting to do this and make sure our protocols are right and putting input into how we are addressing this particular crime to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So it doesn't matter if you get sexually assaulted in Midlothian or Ennis, the protocol is the same. You're going to get the same level of support, the same level of investigation because we're trying to standardize, all of that and help each other out so that everybody is getting quality investigations, quality help and resources, which ultimately ends up in quality prosecution in the end, too.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely, since we're talking about those kind of crimes, talk to me about what's been going on with the county when it comes to those sex assault crimes, when it comes to, you know, minors being affected by that, and how has your office been handling, have those cases gone up, those domestic violence, anything like that? Has those cases gone up? You know, how many cases have you guys been handling? Have you been throwing a book at them? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so, in terms of the adult sex assault cases, there hadn't been that many really for the size of our county, that many reported. We're running at about 50 a year of reported cases of adult sex assault, which is very shocking to me. It should be more. Not that it's not going on. I think it's a very underreported
It
crime,
is.
and so I'm hoping that again with awareness of the heights being available as a resource, people will be more likely to come forward knowing that there are people that will support them, that will walk beside them going through the process. So we're hopeful that that's going to increase. So we're tracking numbers every month to see if that's increasing, to try to do more campaigns regarding awareness for things like that and the heights. So that I think will increase. We had year where it wasn't a sex assault, but it was a domestic violence situation. And the lady, went through the heights and got resources there and worked with our office. And, that guy ended up getting a 70-year prison sentence. So, and she wasn't, the guy used a gun and pulled a gun on her, didn't physically hurt her, but still. And so that, verdict right there was really important to us to know that the citizens of this county are going to take that type of offense seriously. And, people always ask, like, how do you come up with plea bargains and like what you're going to offer? It's from the jury trials, right? Whatever happens at our jury trials that we have, that is a clue to us about what a jury in Ellis County might give for this certain type of offense under these certain circumstances, right? Like every case is different, but it gives us a general idea. So it's important that we look at those cases and see where juries are. Now, having said that, we had another case that was also a domestic violence situation. The person was convicted. That one, though, went to a judge for punishment, and that person got probation. Now, I will tell you, it's not one of our elected judges. It was a visiting judge that came from another county, which is why I don't like having visiting judges that aren't beholden to the citizens of this county and aren't elected. So
Wow.
that's just a situation that happened, this past year. Oh, and then we had one that was a not guilty on an adult sex assault case. So, you kind of are all over the place. Different certain circumstances lead to different results, obviously. But I'm glad that at least jurors are taking things seriously with regards to those kinds of crimes. It is my anticipation, it is my desire that we will be better at working up these cases as a whole in the county, right? Law enforcement, working with advocates, working with our office, like I said, filing those cases sooner so that there's not a huge gap between the event and the eventual trial or whatever needs to happen on that case. So we've done really well on that end, I will say. Our felonies, when we started, we had about 600 cases waiting to go to grand jury in January of last year. Right now, we're about 250
Wow.
maybe. So we've been able to, and that's including cases that are coming in, obviously. So that part's been really good, I think.
How about the child stuff, and sexual trafficking?
Right.
How have you been handling that in the last year? What's going on in the county with those crimes?
So those cases are the cases that are most likely to go to trial, right? We currently have, I would say, close to 100 cases that are set for jury right now between the two courts
Wow.
of felonies, right? Um, and it's hard because those cases are taking a long time. I want to, on the front end, get those cases up faster. So we're working them up faster so that our victim assistance coordinators in my office are trying to keep better track of those victims so that they're consistently engaged and know that we're doing something and we haven't forgotten about them. But it's trying to get those to the finish line on having a jury trial when we do have limited, I mean, we just have limited courts, right? I would love to have 10 more district courts so that we can run some of these cases, through. We'll get through them eventually, but it's still going to be a long process. And that really is unfortunate because what's happening is we will have a case set 1 month and we're just having to continue it to the next month and the next month and the next month because we just can't get to them fast enough. There's an order in which we're statutorily, required to try the cases. So if it's a kid case and a person is in custody, that case gets priority over any other type of case, even murders,
Hmm.
So some of those murder cases are getting pushed to the bottom because the kid cases are moving up. Um, so that's been a real challenge there.
What's the trend, Lindy, when it comes to those crimes? Is it going up since you took office? Is it going down? Where are you is it kind of static, like you're getting the same amount of cases? What's going on there?
I mean, I think every year those always increase because I think the population increases, right? So every year our Children's Advocacy Center is going to be doing way more forensic interviews just because there's going to be more outcries because there's more kids coming here. Again, and again, people are better aware that they need to report these things when a child tells them something that has happened, right? So we get a lot of these cases coming from schools because a child wants to tell a teacher, a trusted teacher or something like that. And then we get the case from there. So I think there's no end in sight to those types of cases, unfortunately. Um, those are just going to continue to increase. So the other major project that I do want to get done, probably not till it'll probably happen by January of next year, but we're working right now to try to form a um, child case task force, investigative task force. So what that would potentially look like is we would take investigators from the major police departments, an investigator from my office that would be the commander over that, and any child sex case that occurs in the county gets worked up by this task force that is trained to do these cases, that can work cases together, that has access to the resources of every police department, our office, and other things.
I get it. Right.
Yeah, and so I think that's gonna help tremendously because unfortunately what happens now, if something were to happen in, one of our smaller, you know, cities, right? They only have one investigator that works these types of cases because they don't have that many investigators. But that doesn't mean that because they're a smaller city, they have less of these cases than one of our bigger cities, right? But you still just have the one working it up. And so that person can't be at the forensic interview and doing a search warrant at the house and getting a search warrant for the phone and doing all the things that need to be done before the next case comes in. And then they have to put this one aside. So we're hopeful that working these cases as a task force, as a group, as a unit, things can be worked up a lot faster. And we don't lose some of that evidence that we'll lose if we don't get it in the first. So, if a sex assault a child, sex assault were to happen, then you would have one investigator go to the Children's Advocacy Center for the forensic interview, or while the other one is getting a search warrant, taking pictures of the house, while another one is interviewing neighbors, the teacher, whoever made the outcry, all of these things, somebody else is getting the phone all at the same time. So we anticipate going that route will enable us to have so much better and more uniform, again, investigations and
Have the
prosecutions.
departments been receptive to this idea?
Yeah, for sure. So I've talked to the major police departments and our sheriff's department. Everybody seems really all on board. It's just trying to figure out logistics, how this is going to work and where everybody would go. We need a physical location for this task force to work out of because we don't want them, working on other things. What happens right now, again, is somebody may be assigned to kid cases in a police department, but guess what? They're also the computer crime person and they're also the this person and something else. So they get pulled in different directions. This way, they come just to us. So, we're trying to set this up now and put that seed in now while, budgets are coming up for cities, and they're talking about their budget for the next fiscal year so that we can really kick this off. Hopefully, if we can, October of this year, if not January of next year for sure.
Talk to me about violent crime. And I mean, not that what we just talked about isn't violent, but I'm talking about like aggravated murder, those types of
Mhm.
crimes. Has that gone up? Has it been steady? How has your office been handling it? Has there been a lot? What's going on with that?
I think I'm trying to figure out how many we had this year. I feel like it is a little less in terms of murders this year for adults. I will tell you though, on our juvenile end, we are seeing an uptick in violent crime that juveniles are
Oh,
committing. I mean,
wow.
it's pretty disturbing. I try to tell as many people as I can that this has gotten really bad. When I started here in this office in 2004, I came in as a juvenile prosecutor and I was prosecuting, graffiti and possession of marijuana, and maybe you stole something from the Walmart, stole makeup or something like that. We are prosecuting now murders, aggravated robbery, aggravated assault, child sex crimes as well. It's bad. I'll just say
On a
that.
juvenile level.
Yes, uh-huh,
Wow.
and so we've had to certify, I believe we certified 2 this year, maybe 4, because at some point, there's only so much the juvenile system can do, right? The juvenile system was designed for rehabilitation.
Right.
That's what it is.
Mhm.
Why we don't call them defendants, we call them respondents. We don't say they're guilty, we say that things are true. It's a different terminology, it's different things because we want hopefully that this act, whatever they did, this crime doesn't affect them for the rest of their life,
Mhm.
right? That's the idea. But we're getting to the point where the juvenile system cannot fix this. We only have to a certain age. We can't say we're going to put this kid on probation for 10 years and work with them. It doesn't work that way. Once, they age out of the system, so to speak, when they're 18, like we're kind of done.
Yeah.
And so when they're committing these crimes when they're 16 years old, we don't have enough time to work with them. And honestly, some of these kids do not need to be out in the free world, unfortunately. Uh, you know, we've gotten to the point where things are so bad that it's really difficult to say we will keep your case as a juvenile. And
How do you decide whether you're gonna charge as an adult? And, like, what's the law in Texas with charging a juvenile as an adult?
yeah, so it depends on the crime. There's only certain crimes you can do it for, murder, manslaughter, aggravated assault with a weapon, child sex cases. And depending on what crime, they generally have to be 14 or older or 15 or older. And so it's sort of case by case, right? We're going to look at, is this their first one, a referral to the system, or have we seen them before?
Right.
And then the circumstances of the actual case, right? We've had some where kids are just shooting people like for nothing. It's not like you could say, oh, this is a self defense situation. It's just, I went up to somebody and I was mad at him, so I
Is
shot
there,
him,
like,
things.
gang activity? Because, unfortunately,
Yeah.
I've been on that side of the house
Mhm.
in a different lifetime
Yeah.
ago, and I understand how much gangs and drugs can influence a child, and so
Mhm.
is it that thing, or is it just these kids are just coming off their video games and deciding to shoot somebody?
Yeah. So for the most part, we haven't seen gang activity here,
Okay.
right? In the county, we generally, we have maybe some gang wannabes here, but not true gang activity in the county. It's mostly kids, and I always go back to parents because it is. It's kids who are not supervised in any meaningful way. It's the same kids who are not going to school. There's a pattern of that. There's drug use involved for sure. It's similar patterns that we're seeing on these kids. And they're getting access to guns. That's the biggest thing. And I don't think most of them, not really getting it from home. They're stealing it from cars, right? So they go around trying to open up car doors. They're stealing guns from cars, stuff like that. So it starts with
Really?
that. And then we end up with shootings, later down the road. So people, please lock up your guns.
Wow.
Please don't have it in your car, number one. Take it inside with you, but please lock your door if you're going to have
Have you
a
had to
weapon.
come after a parent for issues with these kids?
In terms of them making the firearm accessible or
Just in general, and maybe there was something the kid committed a crime and the parent was because of a negligence in some way, shape, or form. Have you had to go after them? I've known that there's
no,
it throughout the country and maybe more lefty states, they've come after parents for things like that. So I don't
mm,
know if you've done something like that.
we can't really, there's not a crime necessarily that we can charge the parents with. Now, the parents potentially could be in contempt of court if they're not following a court order, if they were on release conditions, but most of these kids aren't getting released. They're staying in detention until their case is resolved.
Mhm.
So, it's not that. I would love to. I really think, parents should be held a little more responsible for, the acts of their kids. But then you get into bigger, broader issues of who's taking care of these kids. Are we only going to focus on the mothers? Because I'm telling you, just anecdotally, a lot of these kids are being raised by single parents.
Yeah.
It's usually the mom, or they're being raised by grandparents, or we've even had some being raised by great grandparents,
Yeah.
and that's just not good.
The statistics bear out that's usually there's issues there. But I will say this, just as somebody who, had some very good people who came into my life and when I was misguided, don't give up hope on those kids. Some of them can really end up pulling through. I mean, they could end up being great people if they have some kind of intervention. But
Sure,
that's just
100%. No, yeah, you have to have the right support system though when they get out, right? Because we can offer whatever services that we can to them. But when they come back home, if they're still going to the same environment, same home where there's drugs available, where there's,
yeah.
not a support system, it's going to be really hard for them to turn around.
Okay, how about adults? Because we went into the kids. How about adults? What's been going on that side of the house?
So adults, again, we are seeing, a fair amount of aggravated assaults. People just feel compelled to use weapons on people for simple arguments,
I like how
what
you
should
put
just
that.
be should just be a regular old fight,
Yeah.
turns into quickly guns and knives. And then that becomes big problems. And then, we're having to look at potential defense claims. Law enforcement is really having to work up those investigations to see who the primary aggressor was in those situations, things like that. So those are always going to be there. Drugs are always an issue. However,
Yeah, how was
I will
that?
say, yeah, drugs have unfortunately had to take somewhat of a back seat to all these other crimes, right? So um, I would love for there to be more resources for um, drugs, um, get rehab, things like that that actually work. Um, we don't have that. Again, we don't have those kinds of resources in our county. Hopefully, I was just talking to somebody actually like yesterday about this that, I think the growth that we're having, and once we start having these specialty courts that we're going to be required to have, I think that's going to force providers to start coming into our county because there's going to be a need, and hey, they'll be able to make money here if they come. So I think at some point that's coming, but right now it's still not a great system that we have. But we're seeing more fentanyl than we had in the past.
Hmm.
We have a few cases right now of people being charged for providing fentanyl and then the person died. We have a few of those.
Have the feds
Uh,
have the feds picked up any of these cases? Do they normally or do they jump in on some of these?
the
The
who? Oh,
feds,
the feds.
yeah.
So the feds are interested in large quantities of drugs or selling large quantities of drugs. If it's like a local dealer, they're generally not going to get involved in those kinds of cases. So it's mostly on the state courts to work those up. So far we haven't seen the feds take too many, of those because we haven't really found huge dealers. It's been kind of, local, I
Local,
guess, dealers,
local.
dealer users, I guess you would call them.
Right, right. I could have you here all night because there's just so much to cover when it comes to this. But I mean, it's the one thing that I do want to before we kind of wrap this up. One thing I do want to talk to you about is that Veterans Court. I've been able
Mhm.
to be part of that, and I want you to know. I want everybody publicly to know how grateful I am to for your part in that. You have to decide which veterans qualify for that program. And I know that you've been supportive, like you said during the campaign, that you'd be supportive of that program, and you have. And I want to thank you publicly for that because I've seen some, really good stories, these veterans turning their lives around. And and they lost their way, they didn't lose their honor, and because of how you're doing things, you're giving them the opportunity. So thank you.
Well, sure. It started in the administration before me to get that program up and running. And, I said I would continue it, and we have, and we're expanding it as well. So the county got a grant that increases the county's ability to serve more veterans to surrounding counties. So, the manager, Brent, asked me if I would reach out to surrounding DAs that aren't in a veterans program to see if they might be interested in using our program. So, we do have a few of the counties taking advantage of that. So, we're able to serve about 42 veterans now because of those resources that we've gotten. I'm not saying there's 42 in the program right now because
Hmm.
we can't handle all that at one
Right.
time, but throughout the year we're going to have that many. So it's been beneficial not just for our county veterans, but for surrounding counties as well. What I think most people don't realize about some of these specialty courts, particularly the Veterans Treatment Court, is it's not sort of a slap on the wrist, kind of thing. It's a very intensive program. There's a lot that they have to do, and they come to court, and they're having to answer to the judge and kind of explain what's been going on. Someone is always holding them accountable throughout the process. We don't like wait until the end and see if they made it or not. It is a continuing process throughout the time that they're on probation or community supervision. And it is intensive. They're doing far more than a regular person that's placed on regular probation would be doing. So that's the trade-off, right? They do get a benefit in that, their case would get dismissed and expunged later, but they're doing far more to get that.
Right.
And the program has worked really well. I think there's been maybe 3 so far that have been released prior to graduation, but we've still had pretty good success with the others, and we haven't had anybody reoffend. I mean, it's been pretty early, but still, people that have graduated, they haven't come back, and it really has changed their lives.
Yeah.
And their families, right? You said before, crime doesn't just affect the defendant or the victim, right? There are families on both sides involved that are affected by the behaviors of one person.
Right.
So, for this to help not only the veterans but their families as well, it is a good thing.
Do you plan on doing it for other people, a non-veteran program? Do you want to get one of those diversion programs going for drugs
So,
and stuff? What are you doing with that?
yeah, so the county's gonna be required at some point because of our size, to have these specialty courts, particularly a drug court and a mental health court.
Yeah.
Um, People have also asked potentially about a first responder court as well. The thing about these specialty courts is it does take a lot of personnel to work up these courts. It's not just saying, oh, we have a judge that's willing to do it. We got to get a judge willing to do it. We have to have another prosecutor kind of helping to run these courts. You got to have case managers on the case. So it's a lot of resources um, to not serve a lot of people, right? Because we're serving 40 people versus having what happens to the other 2,000, defendants that we have. So it's sort of a give and take. We're going to go there eventually. And again, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about this, that I don't see that happening in this year, or even maybe the next year, because I want to make sure that we're doing this veterans court right, because it is the prototype for all the other courts that we're going to do.
Okay.
If we can get this in place, get it running well, then yes, because I just don't want to say, let's start things when we haven't really thought them out
Hmm.
and don't have the resources in place that we need to help the people, particularly for the mental health and the drug courts. But once we can get that going, then yes.
For those
And look,
I'm sorry, but for those other courts, can you get the same, like for the VTC, you get a lot of help from the state, from the Texas Veterans Commission. You get a lot of help. You got to do a lot of grant writing, and that's a beast. I know you got to have somebody dedicated to that. But would you be able to get the same kind of help for the other courts?
yes, so there are some grants out there specifically for specialty courts. And again, it does take a lot of work to do, but I know that, Caitlin that runs our behavioral health here for the county, she's very much interested in doing it and will help. And so will Brent that currently works in the Veterans Treatment Court. So we'll have the people that'll get there. Like I said, I want to make sure that we're doing it right, and it's going to be successful before we jump into that. The other thing too is if I had a few more prosecutors, I don't have physical space to put them. Like we're out of space at the office. We just got some new space. We have we have the old tax office got redone. I have my misdemeanor division down there now in that space. But even so, once we do that, we still are out of space up here again,
Right.
because we are reclaiming our trial prep rooms that we had to have two people in. So we're trying to not have to use our conference room space for offices for people. So that's going to be another consideration as well. And then we have to have support staff for that prosecutor also. So there's a lot of considerations and a lot of resources that would go into that, not just the grant to run the program itself.
Before I close out, do you think you've been able to effectively keep up with the effects of growth on the criminal justice system in Ellis County?
Yes, I think that is a huge challenge for us, is trying to keep up with the growth. We are getting a lot more cases from Mansfield and Grand Prairie than we ever have before. Now, people may not know there is a sliver of Mansfield and a sliver of Grand Prairie that is in Ellis
Right,
County.
right,
It's pretty much all at that 360, 287 area. And if you drive by apartments, houses, businesses,
right.
with that comes crime. So we're trying to be proactive in that. I've got a meeting set up in about 3 weeks with the chiefs of those two cities to say, hey, let's make sure we're getting ahead of what's happening in your area
Mhm.
of in our county, to make sure that we're keeping communication with them so that they have what they need from us and they understand what we expect from them, to make sure that the cases that are going to come there are going to be good. So I think we're doing good things in that we are looking forward to how can we do better collectively, right? We really are looking at a lot of things in terms of team things, like whether it's these task forces that we're talking about or the sex assault response teams. It's different things that we're trying to do teams, because I think that really is where things are going to go, to make sure that justice is more uniform. You shouldn't get better justice because you live in Waxahachie than if you live in Ferris, right? Like it
Absolutely.
shouldn't happen that way. So how do we bridge that gap and support the smaller departments? So I think that's kind of the way to go in the future. Now we'll see how this child task force works. I think that's also going to be the prototype. If this works, then we might be able to expand it to other things. So it's real important to me that this works really well.
Well, Lindy, we both have missed dinner.
Yes.
Dinner. I need dinner. I know you've had a long day and you need dinner. So as I close out, I'm just going to give you the mic to speak to your constituents and the people of Ellis County.
Sure. Greatly appreciate everybody putting me in this position. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege for me to do this. I hope that I am doing the work that you expected me to do, that you wanted me to do. And hopefully you're not regretting your vote for me so far. We've done a lot of work this year, but there's still so much more to do. But you know, please feel free to reach out. I can't talk about any specific cases, so don't call me about that. But, if you ever want to speak about generally how cases get worked up or things like that, I'm happy to talk to you about those. Or if you want me to speak at one of your organizations, I'm also happy to do that. We want to be a place that you can be proud of. And we want you to feel safe living in this county. We know there's a reason that a lot of you moved here from Dallas and California and other cities and states in the country. So we want to make sure that you don't regret your decision to be here, because we do want to work for everybody to make sure that justice is being served for all of the victims, regardless of where you come from.
Thank you so much again for being on the show. Can you stick around real quick after the show?